Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. Make sure that you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, be sure to visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com. And before I get into today's topic, I want to take a moment. I want to wish every single one of you a happy Thanksgiving to you and your families. It's a time to reflect on our blessings. We live in the greatest country in the world. And despite our problems, despite all our flaws, there's no better place to be. We have it good here in the United States, and we have to express gratitude over that. And this Thanksgiving, make sure that you enjoy the food, enjoy the company. I hope you're spending the day with loved ones, indulging in all the fixings that Thanksgiving brings. And it's a good time. It's a good time to think about the values that make our country great. It's not just about food and football. It's about the values, the values that we hold, the values of liberty, freedom, opportunity, and resilience. But unfortunately, those values are being eroded away largely due to a breakdown of the family and a failed education system, especially within the institutions of higher learning. And that's what I want to talk about today, the decline of our colleges and universities, how they've transformed the pillars of intellectual growth into daycare centers for overgrown children. I wrote about this in an article for Campus Reform. Make sure you check it out, campusreform.org. I have the links up in the show notes. And I want to start with the basics. Institutions of higher learning have always played a critical role in our society, and these are the places that have led to the United States becoming a global power. This is where young adults are supposed to be developed into capable citizens, and these are the leaders of tomorrow. These are the ones that are trained to lead. Yet we're not treating them as the leaders of tomorrow anymore. They're supposed to be the ones to create, innovate, and solve problems, but instead today's colleges are coddling students, treating them like little fragile children instead of the adults that they are. And they've abandoned the principles of knowledge, merit, critical thinking. They've pushed this idea of victimhood and entitlement. And the 2024 election, the results of the election are a great example where you saw campuses around the country were struggling how to respond, how to cope. It was truly pathetic. Rather than treating the results of a free and fair election as a valuable lesson, you had colleges treating it like it was a traumatic event. They offered counseling sessions, therapy animals to bring in, petting animals, milk and cookies. I mean, are you kidding me? Some professors even canceled classes. And let's be real, this isn't just pathetic. It's a complete disservice to the students in our nation. These institutions should be embarrassed of themselves. Guess what? Life is full of challenges. Life is full of disappointments. And if we don't teach young adults how to cope with adversity, that you're not always going to get your way with things, how can we possibly expect them to succeed in the real world? The real world can be cruel and brutal. And the reaction to President-elect Trump's victory, it's not just an embarrassment to these institutions, it's an embarrassment to my profession. It's an indictment of how far higher education has strayed from its original mission. When professors coddle students with grief to cope with the outcome of an election, or they vilify students over who they voted for and their political beliefs, it's clear we don't have professors. We don't have educational professionals. We have ideologues. And I know I'm generalizing, right? There's plenty of great students out there. There's plenty of great professors out there. I speak to them every single day. But there's far too many that are the opposite. This isn't happening in all classrooms. It's not all professors and students, and I get that. In my classroom, there was no therapy needed. For 2 weeks leading up to the election, we discussed the election, we discussed the personalities, why people vote the way they do. We focused on the Electoral College and how it works. We focused on campaign strategies, what works, what doesn't work. And following the election, my students were able to engage in a constructive discussion. They didn't need milk and cookies. We talked about their assumptions prior to the election and the results of the election, and some of my students were happy with the election outcome. Others were disappointed. But guess what? Every single one of them left with a deeper understanding and appreciation for the American political system and our democratic process. Every single one of them. And while the coddling doesn't reflect all college campuses, there are far too many out there that engage in this stupidity. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine spending $30, $40, $50,000 a year only for your tuition dollars to be spent on milk and cookies and petting animals? This is insane. And this culture of coddling doesn't just harm students, it harms our entire society. We're seeing a generation of fragile, weak-minded individuals who are unable to handle opposing viewpoints. They're unable to handle any type of belief that differs from their own. And they are emerging from some of our finest institutions because they simply cycle through. They can't handle criticism or failure. You have great inflation that has given them this false sense of achievement where most of them believe that they're smarter than they really are. And these institutions have left them ill-prepared for the real world. They're not ready for the workforce. Employers have to spend billions of dollars annually on remedial training for graduates who lack basic skills. It's not supposed to be this way. And it gets worse. We're seeing a mental health crisis among young people at an all-time high because of what they did during the coronavirus. Now, I'm not going to sit here and lie. We started seeing this mental health crisis amongst young people prior to the coronavirus. But the coronavirus and the lockdowns and keeping kids socially isolated, keeping them out of school for 2 years, it was like a wildfire. And you see anxiety, depression rampant. Colleges, they claim that they want to help these students, but their policies just make things worse. They have safe spaces, trigger warnings, speech codes. That doesn't teach resiliency. That doesn't teach personal responsibility and self-reliance. It teaches them the exact opposite. It only reinforces the idea that their emotions and feelings should be put above everything else, that their emotions and feelings should be put above reality, reason, and logic. This is the exact opposite of what students need to thrive. And we're going to take a quick break, but when we get back, I want to dive deeper into this. I want to explain how this coddling culture is eroding academic integrity, turning our colleges into ideological echo chambers. So hang tight. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the P.A.S. Report podcast. So I'm talking about how coddling students on college campuses has created a generation of weak-minded, fragile individuals who are unable to handle the challenges of adulthood. And we see that it's become a problem. And so let's take a closer look at how this culture is systemically eroding academic integrity and has permeated our academic institutions, which continue to push themselves towards irrelevancy. And all the professors need to wake up and realize this, that for centuries, American colleges and universities were the bedrock of intellectual inquiry here in the United States. They were places where students learned to think critically, debate, engage with ideas that challenge their own beliefs. And our universities were some of the finest in the world. Some still are the finest in the world, but we're losing our footing. For 5 years straight, our university system has dropped in the global rankings as China's university system continues to make gains. We led in achievement, we led in innovation, we led in engineering. But those days, they seem to be becoming a distant memory. And understand, you could directly correlate the collapse within our education system to the decline of our nation. Think of all the empires that existed prior to the United States. During their reign, at the height of their power, they led in these things. They led in innovation, engineering. They led in critical thinking and problem solving. But once they lost that, they lost their superpower status. And today, many of our institutions have traded the pursuit of knowledge for the pursuit of feelings. One of the most alarming trends that I've seen throughout my academic career is the idea of grade inflation. The idea that everyone gets an A because nobody wants to hear anyone complain. Students aren't going to complain, parents aren't going to call, and not for nothing. But if you're a college professor and you're worried about parents calling you, I mean, come on now, grow up. If a parent called me, I'd be like, your son or daughter is a young adult, and I just hang right up on them. It's none of their business, okay? My students are responsible for themselves. But we've seen academic rigor take a backseat because we're supposed to preserve the self-esteem of students, preserve the self-esteem of our children. You know, the self-esteem craze of the 1990s and 2000s, it's done immense damage to our society. I don't sit there. I have 2 sons. I don't sit there telling them how great they are. I don't sit there gassing their head up. To me, I want them to be decent human beings. I want them to put in their effort no matter what they're doing to try and be the best and understand that there's always going to be someone better than them. That when they fail, they have to learn how to overcome the failure. They don't just go into the fetal position because they can't handle failure. And instead of keeping it real, you have teachers that were forced to pretend little Jimmy was smart because if little Jimmy didn't get good grades, Mommy would call and complain despite the fact that little Jimmy is really an imbecile. Children were indoctrinated with the belief that winning isn't all that important. Doesn't matter if you win or lose, it's how you play the game. No, winning does matter. And you gave everyone a trophy despite whether or not they deserved it. You gave everyone a trophy whether or not they put any effort into anything. And this mentality has led to this false sense of achievement where some believe they're much more capable than they really are. And again, I'm not saying I'm harsh as a parent. I mean, I'm pretty good to my kids. But whenever they get a participation trophy, I tell them to throw it away because it doesn't mean anything. It's worthless. That you get the trophy when you put the effort in. You get the trophy when you strive to be the best. And if you don't put in the effort, you don't deserve that trophy. See, we have a mentality that has left kids with the inability to handle failure. And failure is an inevitable part of life. We're all going to fail at some point. And if it wasn't for failure and then working to overcome those failures, I wouldn't be here today. I always say that success isn't measured by having things handed to you. It's not measured by cycling people through life. Success is when you fail and then you work really hard to overcome that failure. And if you never fail, you can't possibly know what success is. Instead of instilling self-reliance and resiliency, we have graduates that have these unrealistic expectations about the world and their place in it. And when those expectations clash with reality, their world begins to crumble. And you see this all the time. You see recent college graduates think that it's so easy to just go out there, get a job, and start making six figures. That's not real life. But they're not told that. You know, you listen to every single commencement speech by, all these famous people, and they always say, the world is your oyster and blah, blah, blah. And you're going to be the ones to solve the world's problem. You're the leaders of tomorrow. You need a real graduation speech that says, you graduated, now it really begins. You're going to get kicked in the ass time and time again. And how you respond to that is what determines who you are as a person. And great inflation is just one piece of the puzzle that's cycling through. From kindergarten through college, we've seen this adoption of equitable grading systems, prioritizing emotional considerations over academic merit. You have institutions like Rowan University. Meritocracy is now deemed a microaggression. Think about that for a moment. Merit, the very foundation of achievement, is being discussed and dismissed as offensive. And what's the result? Well, students are no longer judged by the quality of their work. They're judged by some arbitrary standards like what color is your skin? What gender are you? What's your ethnicity? And it goes beyond merit and grade inflation. You have universities implementing speech codes and bias reporting systems. They want to foster an environment of surveillance and fear. And these systems, they encourage students to report on peers and professors for perceived ideological infractions, right? You disagree with me and I'm offended. See, they want to create a nation of narcs, like adult hall monitors that have no life except to find everything offensive. The ones that go around the supermarkets and say, oh my God, there's Aunt Jemima, a black woman on a syrup bottle, and that's offensive. A black man on a box of rice, that's offensive. An Indian girl on a stick of butter, that's offensive. And they become losers. The mentality is just disgraceful, and not for nothing, but it's more reminiscent of Saddam Hussein's Iraq or any other totalitarian state, that when someone says something that you might find offensive because you simply disagree with it, you're going to go report on them. The chilling effect on free speech is undeniable. Intellectual debate, the lifeblood of higher education, has been replaced by a culture of conformity, groupthink mentality, where students equate disagreement with harm. Grow up. Get a spine. Well, I don't want to live in the echo chambers where only approved points of view are allowed. I want to hear all points of view. I don't care if they're farther or left and I disagree with every one of them. I still want to hear them. And you look at this mob mentality that has emerged here in the United States, and is it any wonder why 80% of people self-censor? Because they fear that they're going to be attacked by the mob? I mean, just look at what happened to Riley Gaines a few months ago, a guest speaker. She faced physical intimidation, was assaulted at San Francisco University. Instead of engaging in respectful debate, you had some students resort to violence. And this isn't an isolated incident. We see this all over the place. It's the logical outcome of a culture that prioritizes feelings over facts and victimhood over personal responsibility, and there's no accountability. The second a college student engages in assault on a college campus against a guest speaker, that college student should be dismissed from college because obviously they're not mature enough to be on a college campus. But yet nothing happens. And then there's the issue of the whole diversity, equity, inclusion sham that exists, where you have DEI degree requirements forcing students to take courses that they don't want, they don't need, yet they're going to take it, and they're going to have to view the world through the lens of oppression and identity politics. Are they part of the oppressed class, or are they part of the oppressor class? Everything seen through the prism of race. So instead of preparing students for the real-world challenges, these programs are going to reinforce a mindset of grievance and entitlement. And the shift from education to indoctrination is not only eroding academic integrity, but it's undermining the purpose of higher education itself. And that's why I say many of these four-year universities are pushing themselves towards irrelevancy. But the consequences are staggering. And it's not just sitting on the college campus. Everything that happens on the college campus ultimately bleeds into society. And so these colleges are no longer producing capable, well-rounded graduates. Instead, they're churning out individuals who are fragile, entitled, and poorly equipped to navigate life. Worse, this culture of fragility is infiltrating every aspect of our society. And we're going to take a quick break. But when we get back, I will explain how this toxic mindset is affecting the United States, how it's affecting the workplace, costing billions of dollars in economic activity, how it threatens our global competitiveness. So hang tight and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the P.A.S. report. So in the last segment, I explained how academic integrity is being eroded on college campus. Now I want to explore this culture of fragility and entitlement that's spilling over into the workplace and what it means for America's future. Because the habits and attitudes that students develop in college, they don't really stay on the campus. They follow them into the workforce. They follow them into our communities. And the consequences are devastating. Employers are now faced with a generation of employees who lack basic skills. And these employees break down at the slightest criticism. You have to coddle them at the workplace too now. They have difficulty interacting with their coworkers, and they don't respect things like seniority, where they can actually learn from those that have been in the business for decades, those that hold the wealth of knowledge and have all the experience that they can actually learn from. And there's nothing that's more of a turnoff when you have a recent college graduate that has taken, 7 college courses in the actual subject material, comes in, and they think they know more than the person that's been doing the job for 30 years. They think that they're better equipped to do that job. They're very demanding. It's amazing. You have this. And again, I know I'm generalizing. It's not all the young people out there. I want to make that clear. I've met some really capable young people as a college professor. I have a lot of great students. So I want to make it clear that this isn't the entire generation, but it's a large part of the generation. And so you have a group of recent college graduates that go into the workplace and they demand that the owners and the managers should bow to their needs. You have many of them that are under the false impression that the world stops for them whenever they face an obstacle. And not only is it frustrating, but it actually costs a lot of money. So take productivity, for example. There was a survey. Recent college graduates spend nearly an hour of their workday watching TV or engaging in other non-work activities. This cost employers over $8,000 per employee annually. And then people wonder why automation's coming down the pike, right? I mean, just think about it logically. Robots aren't going to sit there and look at their phone 20 times a day. Robots aren't going to sit there and BS with coworkers and waste time. Robots aren't going to show up late or not show up at all. All around, a robot is a better employee than a human being in many areas. And so people are replaceable. And that's why you have to be careful. That's why you have to show your worth. And it doesn't stop there. I mean, poor writing skills. Writing has collapsed. The writing abilities of the student body, even good students, I have to say, that it's become much more difficult. Nobody knows how to write anymore. And this is a fundamental competency. You need to learn how to write in almost any industry you're going into. It's a fundamental competency. They should have learned it in high school. It should have been honed in college, but it wasn't. And so companies have to spend $3.1 billion each year, $3.1 billion in remedial training. They have to train the new employees how to write. They have to bring in outside writing experts to teach new employees what they should have learned in high school and college. And only 37% of graduating seniors can read, write, or do math at the college level. 36% of college graduates have the ability to think critically. Businesses are taking notice. You have 68% of small business owners say that recent college graduates are unreliable employees who create division and toxicity in the workplace. And think about that. More than 2/3 of small business owners are essentially saying that this generation is a liability rather than an asset. And then there's the jaw-dropping stat that 26% of Gen Zers have brought a parent to a job interview.
Come on, give me a break, man.
Now, I know many parents think that they're doing the right thing, and a lot of parents want their kids out of the basement, but that's not the way to do it. You don't go on a job interview with them. You could help prep them for the job interview, but you got to toughen these kids up. Because this perfectly illustrates the extent of the coddling that's going on, the lack of independence among today's young adults. And I'll talk about that more when we get back from this quick break. So everyone, hang tight. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. So, of course, go beyond the economics of things. It's a culture of entitlement that stifles innovation, collaboration. You have employees prioritize their feelings over the demands of their jobs. You can't have a productive workplace. And if you don't have a productive workplace, well, what does that mean for the community? You have young people calling in saying that they're not coming to work because they need a mental health day. Now, I'm sympathetic to those that suffer from anxiety and depression. Anxiety and depression are real, and you can't just say, get over it. It's not like a switch you could just turn off. So I am extremely sympathetic to that. And I know that life can seem overwhelming at times. I know it's hard. But at the same time, that is life. Life is hard, and the world doesn't stop. You have to keep moving forward, and you can't let your depression and anxiety cripple you. You have to figure out a way to overcome it. And I truly believe that depression and anxiety are off the charts because so many young people, and even older adults for that matter, they lack a sense of purpose. You know, unfortunately, in this society, in our culture, we've defined success by the amount of stuff someone has, by the amount of money someone makes. That if someone has money and stuff, they're going to be happy. And happiness is just a feeling. It's a moment in time. The truth is that people have more stuff than ever before. And it doesn't matter where you fall on the socioeconomic ladder. Someone from the lower socioeconomic status has more stuff than a middle-class person in the 1950s and 60s. The truth is that we have more stuff than ever before, and yet we're more miserable than ever. And it turns out that that stuff doesn't make us happy. That's what it comes down to. Stuff does not equate to purpose and fulfillment. I would argue that if we want to help people, we need to help them see their self-worth, that they have a sense of purpose. And I will bet that depression and anxiety rates drop significantly if we do that. And I know it's easier said than done. I don't pretend that we could just wave a magic wand and make this happen. But one thing is clear. What we've been doing has not been working. In fact, it's just made things worse. And it's undermined our families. It's undermined our communities, our schools. It's undermined our colleges and universities. It's undermined the workplace. It's undermined our society as a whole. It's done extraordinary damage to the United States as a whole. It's undermined our competitive edge on the world stage, and we can't afford to fall behind. You know, we have a lot of challenges in the 21st century, and I was lucky enough to be born in 1980, where I lived through, the height of American power. I lived through a time of immense stability. But times are changing, and things are going to become much more difficult. And we need to prepare not just young adults, we need to prepare everyone for the challenging times ahead. We got here for a reason. And a big part of the reason is that our education system abandoned its mission in preparing students for the real world. Instead, it's created this environment where victimhood is celebrated. Personal responsibility is not only ignored, but it's demonized in favor of the collective. where we pretend that students can be whatever they want, that every student is an academic, that every young person needs to go to college in order to succeed. And that's not necessarily true. Personal responsibility, self-reliance, these things are important American political philosophies. They're supposed to be part of our culture here in the United States, part of the American identity. But we're seeing the attacks on these ideas, these philosophies, these principles, because they're the antithesis of the Marxist ideology that plagues many of our campuses and our society, where everything has to be about the collective. And the implications for us are profound. If we don't reverse the trend, we're going to risk becoming a nation of mediocrity, a nation of people who are dependent on the government for their survival, dependent on a system that determines if they succeed or fail rather than the individual determining it on their own. And that's the intent. That's what they want, right? They want this dependency on government because you don't bite the hand that feeds you, and it secures their power. So the bigger government gets, the more dependent we become. It's not rocket science. Our founding fathers actually spoke a lot about this. It's why they wanted limited government. It's why they believed in the principles of self-governance, individual responsibility, and self-reliance. The further we continue down this road, the closer we are going to get to live in authoritarian society. With that being said, it's not impossible to turn things around. We can do this. We have to start demanding more. We have to demand more accountability from our institutions. We have to raise the standards, enforce discipline, teach students the value of resilience and hard work. We have to stop coddling them as parents. Stop with the nonsense that it's always everyone else's fault. No, maybe it is little Timmy's fault. Maybe it is his fault. Your kids aren't perfect. They're going to make mistakes. So rather than sit there and try and protect them and shield them from any type of discipline, maybe you should be working with teachers and principals and deans to make sure that they're punished, because you're not doing them any favors. We have to get back to the idea of the family unit, that a nuclear family exists to provide a support structure. We have to get back to the idea that you're not always going to win, that you are going to lose and fail. And that's okay. You're just not going to get a trophy if you lose or fail. But you could try harder and work to overcome. These are the things we need to do. We need to encourage open debate in our society, intellectual diversity, not only for the health of our republic, but for the development of capable individuals, not incompetence. And we have to challenge the entitlement mentality. Enough is enough. We have to. We have to teach children about life. And we're lucky enough that we could live in a bubble here in the United States where we're insulated from the world's horrors. And not everyone. I'm again, generalizing. But we're lucky enough that we're insulated. But we have to begin to expose them to the cruel realities of the world. Make them understand how lucky they have it that they're in the United States. We have to focus less on stuff and more on relationships. That relationships is the thing that brings fulfillment. That faith brings fulfillment. And we need a cultural shift. We have to prioritize competence and critical thinking. Now, I want to thank you for joining me today on this Thanksgiving episode of the P.A.S. Report. Make sure that you follow and subscribe to this podcast. I wish you and your families all the best. Reflect on what we're grateful for. I'm grateful for my audience. I can tell you that right now. It's because of you guys that I do this. It's because of the growth that we've seen. And so I'm grateful for my audience, my family, and that I get to live in the greatest country in the world. And we should recommit ourselves to uphold the principles that have made our country great. Like I said at the beginning, liberty, freedom, self-reliance, merit, capitalism, personal responsibility, all important qualities. So have a wonderful Thanksgiving. I'll see you next week with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.